if you have a choice between doing what you're good at and doing what you love, you should do what you love, because eventually you'll get better at it for having loved it, and you may become better at what you love than anything you were previously good at that you didn't. And so uh, that's sort of my first reflection there. But also, it's possible to engage in a subject. You get deep enough, you say, no, I'm not really interested in that. And then you move on, and you might say, well, I wasted 2 years. No, you didn't. You learned what you didn't like, first of all. That's knowledge. Second, you learned a little bit about something that maybe would show up later, would plug in to something you do later. And this is why, for me, I analogize that to a library. Right? You can walk into a library. I bet most books in most libraries will never be checked out ever. But the person setting up the library doesn't know that. You don't know in advance what books might never be checked out. So you got to put it all there so that someone comes in and then they pick the one book that might not have been checked out were it not for them. And that leads them to a new idea that transforms the world. So if your life is a journey, constantly picking up bits and pieces of things you learn, you do not know in advance how you're going to put all that together and make a life out of that. And it may be that you needed all those pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that you created for the very first time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I testify. I mean, I can tell you so much that I learned from the most mundane jobs or the worst bosses. Nothing goes to waste. Right. I want to transition a little bit, jump right into the deep end of critical thinking. You said some things that have really resonated with me recently and over the years, of course. I guess let's start with, how do you train your brain to think differently? Because I find myself getting stuck. And when I say stuck, it means that maybe it looks and feels like confirmation bias. Like, I easily agree with myself. And I think maybe also, nothing's wrong when maybe there is, and I just don't know it. So how do we train ourselves to think differently? Because it's a brain issue, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I think you have to. Let me be more clear about that, because that sounds very defeatist. In my time in school, you mentioned something earlier. Let me just put it to rest here. At no time in school did anybody, not the least of which my teachers, ever tell me, you're going to go far. No one ever said that, ever. So I was not riding on the confidence of grown-ups declaring, based on whatever it was they were observing, that I'm the one they should watch and move forward. And so I'm going to say that first. Second, and by the way, it's not that I didn't have deep interests from very early on. It's not like I was a late bloomer. It's not like I was still trying to find why I should go to school. And so, no. I was deeply in this from a very early age.
Why don't you think people could see your brilliance?
Oh, because they based it on grades, and I had a B average my entire life. I had some A's, B's, and C's, and it averaged out to B. And we're not in a system that believes that the person who performs that way is the one who should give a commencement address, or is the one who the teachers will say, that's the one who's going to make it. And meanwhile, we look around in actual society, and you get people like Bill Gates and Michael Dell and Jim Cameron and Elon Musk and all these people, and none of whom graduated college. They were either dropped out or never attended. And yet they're shaping the world in which we live. So there's clearly a disconnect between the metrics that are invoked when people are trying to decide who's going to succeed and who isn't, and who actually makes a difference in this world. And I'm thinking deep and hard about that, because I want to sort of come out with some very strong statements in the coming years related to that. But Sorry, I distracted myself by going there. Where was I headed?
I was just going to compliment that idea by
Oh, yes. How
saying,
do we think differently?
well, yeah, but
So
I was just going to say, I think it's important to say that, literally and metaphorically, we're measuring the wrong things.
no, we're measuring a thing. It's just what. No, no, no. I want to be clear. I have nothing against exams, standardized exams, grades. I have nothing against that. But if you want to believe that the straight A student is going to lead the world and the B student or the C student is not, then there's a flaw there. So I don't mind the measurements, but add other measures that can give someone confidence that maybe they'll amount to something in life. And so, I just by way of anecdote, my verbal SAT scores, it was like okay. It was like I forgot the percentile, but it was nothing, anything. Anyone would say, "Hey, watch that person. They're gonna." No, it was like it was okay. You know.
Fire under you at all? I just kind of looking back through history, and I remember anecdotally.
Oh, I just didn't care what people said. So it's not a matter whether it lit a fire. It's a matter of its irrelevance given my own ambitions. So, so I knew what I wanted and what I cared about, and there are people passing judgment, and sometimes they're between me and my goal. So I just find other ways to get to the goal. You climb over, you go around, you dig under, and so. Uh, what was my point there about the?
You were saying that school is one measurement, grades are one measurement.
Oh yeah, so I don't mind you measure it. Just don't believe that that's the one indicator of what the rest of your life is going to be or should be. The same goes with like IQ tests. Oh, you got this IQ, so therefore we're going to give you all these opportunities, and you're the one who's going to discover the cure for cancer. Like, no, they're not. Okay, you're hoping they are because you have this measure and you think that's where it's going to happen. It may be, wait a minute, it may be that that person becomes a wealthy philanthropist who funds the research that ends up finding the cure for cancer. And you're not even thinking that way. Okay. So it's the assessments that people are making, the judgments they're making about your future promise and performance based on the metrics that somebody else has established for you. So that's my objection here. It's an issue by way of by way of anecdote. So my verbal score was okay. All right. I forgot the percentile. It might have been 85th percentile or something. It was above middle, but no one is saying, hey, okay. So what is it? Let's fast forward 15 years from that. 15 years. I'm a columnist for Natural History magazine, at the time published by the American Museum of Natural History, a monthly columnist. And I get a letter in the mail from the Educational Testing Service, Princeton, New Jersey. These are the purveyors of the SATs. By the way, that used to be called the Scholastic Aptitude Test. Okay, aptitude, that implies if you do high, you have high aptitude, low, you low aptitude. So you're not, so that was marking you, that was branding you. And so they would ultimately change what those words mean. So it's now the last I checked, Scholastic Assessment Test. It's very different to assess someone than it is to declare that it is your aptitude. So that's a start in the direction that I think we were headed. But anyway, I get a letter in the mail just to show you what kind of a grip they have on us all. It was like, what happened? Are my score is not good? This is like 15 freaking years ago in the past. So I open it and it says, Dear Dr. Tyson. Okay, Dear Dr. Tyson. We read recently one of your essays for Natural History magazine, and we seek your permission to quote from it for an upcoming SAT we are writing, and we want to include this in the reading comprehension section in the verbal part of the exam. And I didn't quite know how to receive that. Is it, well, thank you, or is it fuck you? For me getting this score where no one is thinking I'll ever become a writer, because writers are not drawn from that pool, and even if they would have been, they're discouraged from it because no one is pushing you forward. But I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed putting word to page. I enjoyed communicating in this way. So I didn't care what the score told me. And I knew I had much more learning time ahead of me outside of school than I would ever have in school. So if you're a lifelong learner, your access to knowledge and information and wisdom and insight can become manifold greater than anything any teacher was ever assessing for you while you were in school. So of course I gave permission for this, and they might have even paid like $100 for it. I have to dig up the letter, but for me, that's the best evidence of the mismatch between what role ambition can play in someone's life and the power that people who have over assessing who and what you are and will become have over you. So, so that was, I think that was addressed one of your questions that you put on the table.
I like it. I mean, I think we get stuck in this linear thinking. Either we listen to what other people say about us and what we're capable of, or they judge us on what we've already done, not what we feel capable of doing. Let's go into talking a little bit about...
Oh, by the way, it's bad both ways, all right? People who are always saying you won't amount to anything, people who are saying maybe your loved ones or your family saying that you're the greatest, all right? So both are bad if they're not representative of a reality that will ultimately matter to you as you go forward. So I think your own assessments become important. Make your own measurements of how much you know relative to others. And I think that's, otherwise you become this pinball getting batted around by the comments and opinions of others.
Think about some of these iconic, heroes from the past, people who have shunned the naysayers, whether that's Albert Einstein or Walt Disney or Martin Luther King Jr. or Steve Jobs or Elon.
Yeah, everyone successful will have stories about people saying they will never be successful. Basically, this is, I don't say everyone, but it is so frequent that we really have to take stock of what the hell is going on between school and adulthood.
In fact, I would say that when you hear that, it's good news, that you're probably on the right track. Like, keep going. If someone says it's impossible, you can't do it, you'll never achieve it, like, oh, good, this actually might happen. That's actually maybe good news.
Well, you asked if does it make me stronger or work harder? No, I don't depend on the comments of others in any way for this. Well, what I do, however, I do have an enormous literature, especially from the 19th century into the early 20th century and the eugenics movement. I maintain a literature of anthropological declarations of the superiority of white people, white men specifically. I'm intrigued as I read that, watching how people used to think. What they said about women, people of color, people, Asian people. You said, what gets me mad? That can fire me up. That can say, all right, what next should I prove today? Just to further bury these ugly chapters in the history of academic science. Okay, these were members of the academy doing this, and it fed Hitler's Nazi Germany regime. If anybody could be at the top, and scientists are saying it so, well, clearly the Germans are at the top. All right, and they have superior technologies, and so there it was, and the ugliness and the pseudoscience that derive from it. So yeah, that can fire me up. And I reach in, I can just close my eyes, reach for any book, and there it is. All right.
Injustice is a trigger for me too. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from.